The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Flora stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species. Her uniform, crisp and adorned with the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps, seemed almost primitive compared to the shimmering photonic garments and bioluminescent robes surrounding her. The Vrelian ambassador's 4 eyes blinked in asynchronous confusion. His species spent 20 standard years training their warriors before they ever touched a weapon. Flora smiled, the expression making several nearby delegates lean back instinctively. Humans had a reputation, and that smile promised they were about to understand why. No error, Ambassador. 13 weeks of basic training. The chamber erupted. The Kethrian defense minister, whose people required a decade of philosophical contemplation before military service, stood so abruptly, her anti-gravity throne tumbled backward. The Zoloth representative's scales rippled through the colors of distress and disbelief. The Metharian speaker chirped, his translator struggling with the frequency of his agitation. How can your species possibly defend itself? How did you survive the Zarath invasion? Flora interrupted gently. Before anyone could respond, the holographic display at the chamber's center activated. Footage began to play, grainy combat recordings from Earth's defense during the Zarath assault 3 years prior. In a bombed-out city somewhere on Earth's surface, a young Marine crouched behind rubble. And his uniform was torn, covered in dust and ichor from the insectoid Zarath warriors. He couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old. Philip's tactical display showed 12 Zarath soldiers advancing on his position. His ammunition counter blinked red, 23 rounds remaining. Behind him, a makeshift civilian shelter held 200 refugees. "Command, this is Corporal Phillips." His voice came through steady, despite the plasma fire scorching the air around him. "I'm Winchester on ammo, and they're pushing hard. Civilians are not evac'd." The Galactic Council watched as Philip did something that made no tactical sense to any military doctrine in known space. Instead of retreating to a defensible position or calling for immediate extraction, he set down his rifle, pulled out a combat knife and 2 grenades, and smiled. 13 weeks of training, Flora said softly as the recording continued. We teach them to shoot, to move, to communicate. We teach them basic tactics and unit cohesion. But you can't teach what comes next. That's just... On screen, Philip detonated 1 grenade as a distraction, then charged directly into the Zarath formation with nothing but a knife and 1 remaining explosive. The Council watched in horror as he fought with a ferocity that seemed impossible for his species' physical limitations. He moved between the aliens with brutal efficiency, using their own bodies as shields, turning their superior numbers against them. When the second grenade detonated, 3 Zarath fell. When Philip finally went down, 7 more lay dead around him, but he hadn't fallen alone. The recording shifted perspectives. Stenciled on her body armor, Flora, younger by a few years, her face set in determined fury. She screamed, and the Marines charged. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as these barely trained humans tore through a Zarath unit that should have annihilated them. They fought with weapons and without, with tactics and pure improvisation, with coordination and individual initiative that somehow worked in harmony. The recording ended with Lieutenant Flora kneeling beside Corporal Phillips' body, closing his eyes gently before standing to organize the civilian evacuation. Ambassador Flora's voice broke the silence in the council chamber. Philip trained for 13 weeks before we gave him a rifle. He spent 6 months in active combat before he died holding that position. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates who commanded militaries with soldiers trained for decades. You want to know our secret? It's not the training. 13 weeks gives them skills, yes. The Metharian speaker found his voice. The choice, Flora said simply. Philip chose to hold that line. I chose to go back for him. Every human who puts on a uniform chooses, every single day, to stand between danger and those who can't protect themselves. Your warriors train for decades because you're trying to prepare them for every possibility. We train for 13 weeks because we know we can't. She pulled up another hologram, statistics that made the council murmur in disbelief. Human casualties were higher than any other species in the war. But so were their victory rates. So were their civilians saved. So were their last stands turned victories. You see madness, Flora continued. We see necessity. Your warriors are masters of the art of war. Ours are masters of adaptation, improvisation, and stubbornness. You can't teach someone to charge into certain death for strangers. You can't train someone to smile before they detonate a grenade in close quarters. The Vrelian ambassador's 4 eyes finally blinked in sync. Flora's smile returned, sad and proud in equal measure. We don't create them, Ambassador. We just give them 13 weeks, hand them guns and grenades, and trust them to become what the moment needs them to be. Sometimes they become heroes. Sometimes they become legends. She gestured to the empty holographic space where the recordings had played. Every species in this council has superior training, superior technology, superior tactics. But when the Zareth came to Earth, they learned what the galaxy is still learning. It's not about how long you train your warriors. The chamber remained silent as Flora returned to her seat. In that silence, 47 species reconsidered everything they thought they knew about warfare, training, and the strange, brief-lived, recklessly courageous species called humanity. 13 weeks to make a Marine. A lifetime to understand what that really meant. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the enemies of humanity were learning that lesson the hard way.